They say New York City has a pulse, a heartbeat, a rhythm that flows through its concrete veins and steel arteries. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes, that pulse isn't the city's at all. Sometimes, it's the echo of all the lives that came before you, beating in perfect synchronization, waiting to add yours to their eternal chorus. I discovered this truth in apartment 4B of the Blackwood, a pre-war building on the edges of Bushwick, where the industrial sprawl begins to fade into residential desperation. My name is Marcus Rodriguez, and I'm here to tell you how I became someone else. Or perhaps, how someone else became me. It started with an opportunity I couldn't refuse. I'd been working as a conservation specialist at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, focusing on paint analysis and restoration of contemporary pieces. The pay was decent, but New York has a way of making decent feel inadequate. When my landlord announced a 40% rent increase, I found myself facing an impossible choice. Leave the city and abandon my career, or find an alternative. That's when I found the listing. Historic pre-war one-bedroom, $1,200 a month, utilities included. In New York, that's not just a deal. It's practically a fairy tale. The kind that usually ends with a scam or worse. But there it was, complete with pictures that showed high ceilings, original hardwood floors, and windows that caught the afternoon light in a way that made my conservator's eye light up with possibilities. The rental agent, Miss Blackwood, no relation to the building's name, she assured me, was a severe woman with steel gray hair and vintage cat-eye glasses that seemed to belong to another era entirely. She spoke with precise, clipped tones as she led me through the apartment. Miss Blackwood, the previous tenant, Miss Isabella Martinez, was an artist. Such a lovely girl. Talented, dedicated. She had such potential. The way she said potential made my skin crawl, but my professional instincts were already analyzing those paint splatters. The pigment composition seemed unusual, colors that shouldn't exist in that particular combination, creating effects that defied my years of expertise. I signed the lease that day. Miss Blackwood's fountain pen felt heavy in my hand, the ink seemingly darker than ordinary black. "Miss Blackwood, welcome home," she said, and for a moment her smile seemed to contain too many teeth. The move-in was oddly easy. Despite the 5-floor walk-up, my belongings seemed to find their places naturally. My collection of pigment samples, restoration tools, and reference books arranged themselves with an efficiency I hadn't planned. Almost as if the apartment knew exactly where everything should go. I dismissed the thought as exhaustion, but later, I would remember that moment and recognize it as the first sign. The changes were subtle at first. I've always been methodical. You have to be when you're analyzing centuries-old paint layers. But now my routines began to shift, to align with a rhythm I hadn't consciously chosen. My morning coffee ritual became elaborate. Beans ground precisely at 6:45 a.m., water heated to exactly 200 degrees, 4 minutes of steeping and a French press I didn't remember buying. I found myself reaching for tools and materials in exactly the right places, despite never having organized them. My hand would move to switches and handles without hesitation, even in the dark. The apartment wasn't just familiar, it was intimate. As if I'd lived there for years instead of weeks. Then I found the sketchbook. It was tucked behind the radiator, its leather cover worn smooth by years of handling. Inside, Isabella Martinez's art told a story that made my blood run cold. The first pages showed vibrant street scenes, full of life and color. But as I turned each page, the images grew darker while more abstracted. Faces began to blend together, identities merging and splitting like oil on water. The pigments used in these later works, they were impossible. Colors that shouldn't exist. Combinations that defied the laws of light and chemistry I'd spent years studying. The final drawing showed a woman seated at a desk. This desk, my desk. But her features were impossible to focus on. They shifted between strokes, as if multiple faces were trying to occupy the same space. In the corner, a single line of text. We are all Isabella now. That night I dreamed of painting. Not analyzing or restoring, but creating. My hands moved with confident strokes, using techniques I'd never learned, but somehow knew intimately. I woke to find my restoration notes transformed. My careful analysis of pigment composition had become something else. Theories about colors that shouldn't exist. Techniques that defied conventional chemistry. My colleagues were intrigued. Colleague, your insights into contemporary color theory are revolutionary. But these weren't my insights. They couldn't be. The changes accelerated. I began finding art supplies in my workspace that I knew I hadn't bought. Brushes with strange bristles. Pigments in colors I couldn't quite name. They felt natural in my hands, as if I'd been using them for years. My restoration work began to change. I wasn't just preserving art anymore, I was transforming it, using techniques that seemed to come from somewhere, or someone else. My reflection became unreliable. Sometimes in the corner of my eye, I'd catch a glimpse of someone else looking back at me. A woman with dark eyes and paint-stained fingers. She never appeared when I looked directly, but I could feel her presence growing stronger. The changes accelerated. I began finding art supplies in my workspace that I knew I hadn't bought, brushes with strange bristles, pigments in colors I couldn't quite name. They felt natural in my hands, as if I'd been using them for years. My restoration work began to change. I wasn't just preserving art anymore. I was transforming it, using techniques that seemed to come from somewhere or someone else. My reflection became unreliable. Sometimes in the corner of my eye, I'd catch a glimpse of someone else looking back at me. A woman with dark eyes and paint-stained fingers. She never appeared when I looked directly, but I could feel her presence growing stronger. I started researching the building's history. The Blackwood had been artist housing since the 1960s, but the records were oddly incomplete. Tenants were listed, but their ends were always vague. They didn't move out so much as they faded away, each one replaced by someone new, someone seeking affordable rent in a city that trades in dreams and desperation. Isabella Martinez wasn't the first. Before her was Amanda Chen. Before Amanda was Sarah Williams. Before Sarah was Isabella Rodriguez. The names changed, but patterns emerged. Always artists, always alone, and always seeking something they couldn't quite name. I found their works in local galleries, online portfolios, small exhibitions. The style was unmistakable. The same impossible colors, the same merging of identities, the same sense of something vast and hungry lurking just beneath the surface of reality. Different mediums, different decades, but the same vision, the same truth trying to emerge. The apartment wasn't just collecting tenants. It was collecting identities. Each person who lived here left something behind. Their techniques, their vision, their essence. And the space absorbed them, preserved them, waiting for the next desperate soul seeking shelter in a city of millions. My work at the museum began to attract attention. My restorations weren't just preserving art anymore, they were enhancing it, bringing out colors and patterns that seemed to move when viewed from the corner of your eye. My supervisors were impressed, but concerned. "Supervisor, these techniques aren't in any conservation manual." Of course they weren't. The plant by the window, a Monstera deliciosa that seemed to thrive despite the lack of direct sunlight, became my confidant. I talked to it about the changes, about the way my identity seemed to be dissolving into something older and larger than myself. It grew more lush, more vibrant, as if feeding on my transformation. Last week, I found another sketchbook. This one was new. The pages still crisp, but the drawings inside were in my hand, showing scenes I'd never witnessed, streets from decades past, faces I'd never met but somehow knew intimately. And the colors that shouldn't exist, couldn't exist. But there they were, pulsing with impossible life in the margins, names repeated like a mantra. Isabella, Amanda, Sarah, Isabella, Amanda, Sarah. Yesterday, Miss Blackwood visited. She smiled that too wide smile when she saw my latest work, experiments with pigments that seemed to shift and change as she watched. The transformation is almost complete. Soon you'll understand your role in the cycle. Sound of high heels on hardwood, door closing. I should leave. I know this, but the rent is so reasonable, and my work has never been more innovative. The art world is starting to take notice. I have a paper on quantum chromatic theory and contemporary art conservation being published next month. Or perhaps it's our paper. It's getting harder to tell the difference. The truth is, I don't think I can leave, not now. Not when I'm so close to understanding what we're becoming, what we've always been becoming. Since the first artist signed a lease in desperate hope. I should leave. I know this, but the rent is so reasonable, and my work has never been more innovative. The art world is starting to take notice. I have a paper on quantum chromatic theory and contemporary art conservation being published next month. Or perhaps it's our paper. It's getting harder to tell the difference. The truth is, I don't think I can leave, not now. Not when I'm so close to understanding what we're becoming, what we've always been becoming. Since the first artist signed a lease in desperate hope. This morning I put up a listing. Seeking roommate for gorgeous pre-war one-bedroom. Perfect for artists. Utilities included. $1,200 a month. Previous tenant leaving due to professional opportunities. The apartment is ready. The routines are set. The patterns are established. We are waiting. Isabella, Amanda, Sarah, and all the others. Waiting for the next person who needs a home badly enough to ignore the warning signs. Waiting to add another voice to our chorus. Welcome to the Blackwood. Welcome to apartment 4B. Welcome home.